An ex-soldier saved a stranger from a robbery, unknowingly preventing a global conspiracy that had been years in the making. It began with something as simple as being in the right place at the wrong time, or perhaps it was the wrong place at the right time. For Michael Reeves, the distinction hardly mattered anymore. The weight of his military rucksack had long been replaced by the invisible burden of memories that clung to his shoulders like a winter coat he couldn't shed. 3 years since his honorable discharge, and still the night terrors came like clockwork. 3:17 a.m., the exact time the IED had detonated, taking his squad and leaving him with nothing but survivor's guilt and a slight limp that bothered him more in his mind than in his body. Rain pelted the cracked sidewalk of downtown Seattle as Michael hunched his shoulders against the deluge. November rain was different here. Not the gentle mist of spring, but a cold, persistent downpour that seemed to find every seam in his weather jacket. He'd left his apartment without purpose, as he often did these nights when sleep evaded him and the walls closed in a little too tightly. The streetlights cast long, watery reflections across the empty streets. 3:30 in the morning, and the city was a ghost town, just the way he preferred it. No prying eyes, no well-intentioned questions about his service. No need to manufacture smiles that never reached his eyes. A flicker of movement caught his attention. Something out of place in the rain-washed stillness. Across the street, outside a small convenience store with its fluorescent lights still humming, a confrontation unfolded. A tall figure in a dark hoodie had cornered someone against the wall. Even from this distance, Michael recognized the aggressive stance, the telltale bulge of what was almost certainly a concealed weapon. His body responded before his mind had fully processed the scene. Old instincts, muscle memory honed in combat zones half a world away. He was already crossing the street, steps silent despite his size, the world narrowing to tactical assessment. One assailant, one victim, confined space, potential weapon, civilian environment. "I don't have anything else," the victim was saying, voice trembling but with an underlying firmness that caught Michael's attention. A woman, mid-30s perhaps, soaked to the bone, clutching a messenger bag to her chest like it contained her heart itself. "The drive, lady. I know you have it." The assailant's voice was tight, controlled. Not the desperate tone of a common thief looking for drug money. Last chance before this gets unpleasant. Michael was 10 feet away when the assailant reached inside his jacket. Time compressed, the way it always did in moments of crisis. Rain droplets seemed to hang suspended in the air. The woman's eyes widened. Clear, intelligent eyes that showed fear but not panic. The man's hand emerged with the glint of metal. "Military police." Michael barked, the lie flowing easily from his lips, his voice carrying the unquestionable authority that had once commanded men in battle. The assailant spun, weapon halfway raised. Michael was already moving, closing the distance with 2 long strides. His left hand deflected the gun while his right delivered a precise strike to the man's wrist. The weapon clattered to the wet pavement. The assailant recovered quickly, too quickly for an ordinary mugger, dropping into a fighting stance that spoke of professional training. 3 rapid exchanges followed, a blur of practiced movements. Michael took a glancing blow to his ribs but managed to position himself between the attacker and the woman. The assailant's eyes darted from Michael to the woman, then to the gun lying several feet away. "Not worth it," Michael said quietly, his voice carrying the absolute certainty of someone who had faced death and walked away. For a moment, the world balanced on a knife edge. Then the assailant backed away, lips pressed into a thin line of frustration. "This isn't over," he said, but the threat wasn't directed at Michael. His eyes locked on the woman for one final, chilling moment before he disappeared into the labyrinth of rain-slicked alleyways. The sudden absence of immediate danger left a vacuum, quickly filled by the persistent drumming of rain and the distant wail of a siren. Michael turned to the woman, professional assessment replacing combat focus. She was shivering, but her eyes remained clear and focused. "Are you hurt?" he asked, already scanning for injuries. "No." She tucked a strand of wet hair behind her ear, studying him with an intensity that made him want to step back. "You're not military police." It wasn't a question. Michael's mouth twitched in what might have been the ghost of a smile. "Not anymore." She nodded once, as if confirming something to herself. "Thank you." Simple words, but delivered with such genuine weight that they seemed to part the rain around them. "Do you need me to call someone?" Michael was already stepping back, preparing to dissolve back into the anonymous night. The familiar post-adrenaline tremors were beginning in his hands. Soon the crash would come, leaving him drained and raw. "Actually, She hesitated, clutching her bag tighter. I could use a cup of coffee, and I think I owe you one at the very least. Michael's reflexive decline died on his lips as lightning briefly illuminated her face. There was something in her expression, not the expected shock or lingering fear, but a curious mixture of relief and calculation. Professional assessment. She'd been frightened, yes, but not surprised by the attack. There's a diner around the corner. Opens at 4. The words emerged before he'd fully decided to speak them. Jasmine's. Best coffee in this part of town. She smiled then, a genuine expression that transformed her face from merely attractive to something memorable. Jasmine's it is. I'm Eliza, by the way. Eliza Chen. Michael Reeves. She offered her hand, and after a moment's hesitation, he took it. Her grip was firm, her hand surprisingly warm despite the rain. Something passed between them in that simple contact. Not the electric spark of attraction, though she was certainly beautiful in an understated way, but rather a mutual recognition. Two people accustomed to standing apart, suddenly finding themselves on common ground. Neither could have possibly known that this simple handshake, this chance encounter in the rain, had just altered the course of events far beyond the confines of a single wet night in Seattle. That somewhere across the world, carefully laid plans spanning continents and governments were beginning to unravel. That within a week, people in positions of immense power would learn the name Michael Reeves and curse it. For now, they were simply two strangers walking through the rain, connected by nothing more than an act of courage and the promise of hot coffee as the first hints of dawn began to lighten the eastern sky. Jasmine's Diner was exactly the kind of place that had survived decades by understanding its purpose in the world, providing decent food, exceptional coffee, and an atmosphere of discreet privacy for those who valued such things at odd hours. The bell above the door jingled softly as Michael held it open for Eliza, both of them dripping rainwater onto the worn linoleum floor. Jasper, the night manager who'd seen Michael through countless sleepless nights, nodded in recognition from behind the counter, but raised an eyebrow at the company. In 3 years, Michael had never brought anyone with him. Booth in the back? Michael asked, already knowing Eliza's answer. Something about her screamed situational awareness, the way her eyes had immediately mapped exits, the subtle positioning that kept her back to the wall. Perfect. She slid into the red vinyl seat, placing her messenger bag beside her rather than on the floor. The leather satchel never seemed to leave her immediate reach. Michael took the seat opposite, angling himself to maintain sight lines to both the entrance and the kitchen door. Old habits. He caught Eliza noting this with a flicker of approval. Jasper appeared with 2 steaming mugs without being asked. The usual for you, Michael? And for the lady? Just coffee for now, thank you, Eliza said, wrapping her hands around the mug as if trying to absorb its warmth through osmosis. When Jasper retreated, a pocket of silence expanded between them. Michael found himself studying her more carefully. Eliza Chen carried herself with the poised confidence of someone comfortable in professional settings. Her clothing, though now rain-soaked, was of quality make, casual but expensive. The watch on her wrist was subtle but precisely chosen. Intelligence officer, he thought, or maybe corporate security, something adjacent to his former world. That wasn't a random mugging, he said finally. Deciding directness was the most respectful approach. Eliza took a deliberate sip of her coffee before meeting his eyes. No, it wasn't. The man asked for a drive. Not your wallet, phone, or jewelry. She nodded, seeming to make a decision. I'm a data analyst for Quantum Secure. We contract with various government agencies. And the drive contains encrypted findings from my latest project. She paused. Findings that certain people would prefer remain buried. Michael absorbed this, the familiar weight of classified complications settling over him like an old coat. I'm not asking for details you can't share. I know. She studied him over the rim of her mug. Former military, special operations, most likely given your hand-to-hand capabilities. Honorably discharged, but not by choice. Combat PTSD, insomnia. You've been stateside at least 2 years, but haven't fully reintegrated into civilian life. Michael felt his expression close, the way it always did when someone peeled back his layers without permission. That's quite an analysis. It's what I do. She set her mug down. I read patterns in data. Sometimes those patterns are in people. And what pattern brings a data analyst out at 3 in the morning with classified information without security protection? The question hung between them. Outside, the rain had subsided to a gentle patter against the windows. The first delivery truck of the morning rumbled past. momentarily drowning out the soft jazz playing through the diner's ancient speakers. "I discovered something I wasn't supposed to find," she said finally. "Something buried in seemingly unrelated data sets spanning multiple agencies. When I brought it to my supervisor, he told me to drop it. When I didn't," she shrugged, "my security clearance was suddenly under review. My access restricted. So I worked at night, off the grid, made copies, and someone found out. Apparently, her fingers traced the edge of her mug. I was on my way to meet a journalist I trust when your friend in the hoodie interrupted my plans." Michael felt the familiar tightness in his chest, the one that always preceded involvement in something complicated and potentially dangerous. The part of him that had spent years in therapy learning to build a normal life urged him to wish her well and walk away. But another part, the part that still woke at 3:17 a.m. searching for purpose, leaned forward. "What did you find, Eliza?" She met his gaze directly. Evidence of a coordinated operation involving key members of intelligence agencies from 3 countries, several multinational corporations, and at least 2 major financial institutions. They're positioning for something big, something tied to a date 6 days from now. What kind of operation? I'm not entirely sure, but it involves massive resource reallocation, communication blackout protocols, and the quiet repositioning of certain military assets. She lowered her voice. And the systematic elimination of specific individuals who might notice the pattern. The implication hung in the air between them. Michael felt the familiar clarity of purpose that combat situations had always brought him. A crystalline focus that cut through the background noise of his daily struggles. Like data analysts who are too good at their jobs, a smile ghosted across her lips. Exactly like that. You need to go to the authorities. That's the problem. She leaned forward slightly. I don't know who I can trust. The pattern crosses too many jurisdictional lines. Too many agencies are potentially compromised. The rain had stopped completely now. Through the window, the first gray light of dawn illuminated a world washed clean, at least on the surface. Michael watched a delivery man unloading bread at the bakery across the street, going about his normal morning routine, blissfully unaware of the conversation taking place across the way. I have a friend, Michael said slowly. Former Army intelligence, now works private sector. She's solid, completely off the grid. If anyone can help verify what you found and identify a safe channel, it's her. Hope flickered across Eliza's face, quickly tempered by caution. Why would you help me? You don't know me. You don't know if what I'm saying is true. Michael considered this. The question was fair. By all rational metrics, he should walk away from this woman and her dangerous data. Go back to his apartment, to his night terrors and therapy appointments, and the endless search for meaning in civilian life. Because, he said finally, you looked frightened tonight, but not surprised. Because you're risking everything to follow through on something you believe matters. And because for the first time in 3 years, I feel like I'm exactly where I need to be. The simple truth of it hung between them. Eliza's expression softened, a mixture of gratitude and something deeper. Recognition, perhaps, of a kindred spirit who understood what it meant to stand alone with an uncomfortable truth. Your friend, she said. How soon can we meet her? Michael checked his watch. If we leave now, we can be at her place by 7. Eliza nodded, decision made. As they gathered themselves to leave, Michael caught Jasper's eye and nodded his thanks. The older man gave him a subtle salute, the same farewell he'd offered hundreds of times, but somehow different today, as if he sensed that Michael wouldn't be back for his usual 3:30 a.m. coffee anytime soon. Outside, the world was transforming in the soft light of dawn. Streets that had seemed threatening in the darkness now bustled with early commuters. Michael found himself walking slightly ahead of Eliza, scanning routinely for threats, creating a buffer between her and the street. The weight of responsibility settled over him, not the crushing burden of survivor's guilt he'd carried for years, but something cleaner, more purposeful. Michael? Eliza said quietly as they waited at a crosswalk. There's something else you should know. He turned to her, noting the way the morning light caught the determined set of her jaw. The operation, whatever it is, it's codenamed Lazarus Protocol, and one of the documents I found had a list of targeted individuals. She met his eyes directly. Your name was on it, not as a primary target, but as a person of interest to be monitored and potentially neutralized if certain conditions were met. The pedestrian signal changed, but Michael remained frozen. That's not possible. I've been out for 3 years. I'm nobody. Nobody doesn't shut down a human trafficking ring operating out of Eastern Europe. Nobody doesn't save 36 hostages in an operation so classified, it officially never happened. Her voice was gentle but firm. You may have left that life behind, Michael, but clearly someone thinks you're still very much somebody. The crosswalk signal began blinking its warning. Around them, the city continued its morning routine. Thousands of lives intersecting and diverging. Most of them blissfully unaware of shadowy conspiracies and coded protocols. How do you know about those operations? Michael asked, his voice barely audible above the city noise. I told you, I'm good at finding patterns in data. Even data that's supposed to be invisible. She touched his arm briefly. I think that's why I trusted you instantly back there. Some part of me recognized you from the files. The light changed again. This time they stepped off the curb together, moving in perfect synchronization. 6 days until whatever Lazarus protocol was meant to initiate. 6 days to unravel a conspiracy spanning continents. 6 days that would change everything. For the first time since that fateful day when an IED had shattered his unit and his sense of purpose, Michael felt the fog of his existence lifting. The familiar phantom weight of his tactical gear settled across his shoulders, not as a burden this time, but as a reminder of capabilities long dormant. We need to move faster, he said, scanning the street with newly sharpened awareness. And we need to be smarter than we've ever been. Eliza matched his stride, her messenger bag clutched firmly against her side. Together then? Together, Michael confirmed as the morning sun finally broke through the clouds, casting long shadows behind them as they walked toward an uncertain future, and the first real purpose either had felt in a very long time. Catherine Winters lived in a converted warehouse loft in one of Seattle's formerly industrial districts. The building itself was nondescript. Red brick facade, minimal security cameras that Michael knew were supplemented by at least a dozen hidden ones, and a reinforced door with an innocuous-looking electronic lock that could probably withstand a battering ram. Your friend takes security seriously, Eliza observed as Michael led her through a series of seemingly random turns through alleyways and side streets, doubling back twice to ensure they weren't followed. Kate was paranoid before it was fashionable. Michael replied, the ghost of a smile touching his lips. She used to say that just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they aren't after you. Smart woman. Smartest I know. Michael pressed the intercom button, standing squarely in front of the camera hidden in the brick mortar. It's Reeves. A long moment of silence followed. Michael could feel Eliza's tension beside him, the weight of the data she carried, the uncertainty of trusting her life to a stranger's judgment. The intercom crackled. You look like hell, Reeves. A woman's voice, husky and precise. And you brought a friend. That's new. We need to talk, Kate. Michael kept his voice neutral, but something in his tone must have communicated urgency. Another pause, then the heavy door buzzed. Michael pushed it open, gesturing for Eliza to enter first. The interior contrasted sharply with the building's industrial exterior. Clean lines, state-of-the-art technology seamlessly integrated with comfortable furnishings. And standing in the center of it all was Catherine Winters, 5 feet 4 inches of coiled intensity, her silver-streaked black hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, eyes that missed nothing behind stylish glasses. 3 years of radio silence, and now you show up at dawn with a woman carrying classified intelligence. Kate crossed her arms. Some people bring flowers, Michael. You hate flowers, Michael replied automatically, falling into their old rhythm. Kate, this is Eliza Chen. Eliza, Catherine Winters, former Army intelligence, currently freelance cybersecurity consultant. Among other things, Kate amended, studying Eliza with undisguised interest. Quantum Secure Data Analytics Division, specialized in pattern recognition across disparate databases. Recruited from MIT 6 years ago after publishing a theoretical framework for identifying causality in seemingly random data points. She tilted her head. How am I doing so far? Eliza's expression remained admirably composed. My paper was actually published in the Journal of Computational Analysis, not MIT Press. Kate's mouth twitched. I stand corrected. She turned to Michael. I assume this isn't a social call. Eliza discovered something big. Michael glanced at the windows automatically. And now people are trying to kill her for it. People are trying to kill everyone these days. Be more specific. Eliza stepped forward, removing a small external hard drive from her messenger bag. I have evidence of a coordinated operation involving multiple intelligence agencies and private sector entities. Codename Lazarus Protocol. Implementation date 6 days from now. Kate's casual demeanor evaporated instantly. She moved to a panel on the wall, pressing her palm against it. Steel shutters silently descended over the windows, and a soft hum indicated electronic countermeasures activating. Say that code name again. she said, her voice suddenly stripped of all inflection. Lazarus Protocol. Kate's eyes flickered to Michael. And you got involved because he saved me from an assailant last night, Eliza explained. Someone trying to get this drive. Of course he did. Kate's expression softened fractionally. Still playing the hero, Reeves? Some things never change. Before Michael could respond, Kate gestured toward a secure workstation in the corner. Let's see what you've got, Miss Chen. For the next hour, Eliza walked them through her discoveries. Data points extracted from various classified systems, financial transactions that coincided with specific personnel changes in key agencies, resource allocations that made no sense unless viewed as part of a larger pattern. And finally, the list of names. Individuals flagged for surveillance or elimination, including Michael's. Kate absorbed it all in silence, occasionally asking pointed questions that revealed her intimate knowledge of intelligence community operations. When Eliza finally finished, Kate leaned back in her chair, removing her glasses to rub the bridge of her nose. Well, she said finally, either you've uncovered the conspiracy of the century, or you've assembled the most elaborate pattern of coincidences I've ever seen. And which do you think it is? Michael asked quietly. Kate replaced her glasses, her expression grim. 3 weeks ago, an old contact reached out to me. Wanted to know if I'd heard anything about something called Lazarus. Said people were disappearing, people who shouldn't be able to disappear. I started digging but hit walls everywhere. She looked at Eliza with newfound respect. You found connections I missed. So you believe me, Eliza said, relief evident in her voice. I believe something very bad is in motion. Kate turned to her computer, fingers flying across the keyboard. The question is what exactly Lazarus Protocol entails and how to stop it. Michael moved to the window, carefully peering past the edge of the steel shutter. The city was fully awake now, bathed in morning sunlight that belied the darkness they were uncovering. We need safe haven first, somewhere off the grid where Eliza can continue analyzing the data. Already on it, Kate replied without looking up. I have a place in the mountains. No electronic footprint, fully stocked, defensible position. She paused, glancing at Eliza. But first, we need to make sure you weren't followed here, and that you're not carrying any tracking devices. Eliza nodded, already removing her watch and phone. Check everything. I wouldn't put it past them to have tagged me somehow. Kate produced a handheld scanner, running it meticulously over Eliza's belongings and clothing. When she reached the messenger bag, the device emitted a soft beep. Clever, Kate murmured, examining the bag more closely. There's a tracker sewn into the lining. Professional grade, virtually undetectable without specialized equipment. Eliza paled slightly. How long has it been there? No way to tell. Kate carefully extracted the tiny device, studying it. But this explains how your friend in the hoodie found you last night. Michael's body tensed. If they tracked her here, already ahead of you. Kate moved to another workstation, typing rapidly. I'm creating a false signal path. It'll look like the tracker is moving south toward Portland. She checked her watch. But we should assume we have limited time. 30 minutes maximum to clear out. The room shifted into controlled urgency. Kate downloaded copies of Eliza's data while simultaneously erasing all traces of their presence from her systems. Michael gathered essential supplies, weapons from a hidden compartment, communications equipment, medical supplies. Eliza stood in the center of the whirlwind, watching these two former military professionals work with practiced efficiency. I'm sorry, she said suddenly, for bringing this to your doorstep. Kate looked up briefly. It don't be. This is what we're built for. Michael caught the we with a flicker of surprise. Despite 3 years of civilian life, Kate still considered him one of them. Still trusted his instincts, his capabilities. The realization settled something within him, a piece clicking back into place. Vehicle? He asked Kate. Garage level. Black SUV, reinforced, clean papers. Take the service elevator. She handed him a set of keys and a small case containing burner phones. Head east into the Cascades. Coordinates are programmed in the GPS. I'll follow once I've finished here. Michael nodded, automatically checking the magazine in the Glock she'd handed him before securing it in his waistband. The familiar weight was both comforting and disturbing, a reminder of a life he'd tried to leave behind. Kate, he said quietly as Eliza gathered her things. If this goes sideways, it won't. She met his eyes. Because you're back in the game now, Reeves. And whatever else has changed, I know you don't fail when it matters. The simple vote of confidence hit him with unexpected force. For 3 years, he'd been drifting, haunted by his past failures, the men he couldn't save. Kate's words cut through that fog of guilt like a laser through smoke. 30 minutes to the mountains, he confirmed. Watch your 6. Always do. She smiled then, a rare, genuine expression that transformed her face. It's good to see you, Michael. Even under these circumstances. You too, Kate. As he ushered Eliza toward the service elevator, Michael felt the familiar calm of operational focus settling over him. The mission parameters were clear now. Protect Eliza, secure the data, uncover the conspiracy, prevent whatever Lazarus protocol was planning to unleash on the world. For the first time since that IED had shattered his old life, Michael Reeves felt like he was exactly where he belonged, standing between innocent people and those who would harm them. The irony wasn't lost on him that it had taken a global conspiracy to make him feel human again. In the elevator, Eliza watched him with those perceptive eyes of hers. You're different now, she observed quietly. Since we got here, Michael considered this as the elevator descended. I'm remembering who I used to be. And who is that? The doors opened to reveal the dimly lit garage. Michael scanned the area automatically before answering. Someone who makes a difference. The Cascade Mountains rose like sentinels against the eastern sky, their snow-capped peaks catching the midday sun as Michael guided the SUV along increasingly remote roads. Beside him, Eliza dozed fitfully, exhaustion finally claiming her after the adrenaline of the past 12 hours had worn off. Michael welcomed the silence, using the time to process everything they'd learned. Lazarus Protocol, a coordinated operation involving intelligence agencies from multiple countries, powerful corporations, and influential financial institutions. The targeted elimination of individuals who might expose the plan, and somehow his name on a watch list despite 3 years of intentional obscurity. The pieces didn't quite fit together yet, but the pattern was unmistakable. Something world-altering was being prepared, something that required extensive resources and absolute secrecy. The GPS directed him onto a narrow Forest Service road that wound deeper into the mountains. Pine trees crowded close to the pavement, creating a natural tunnel that would have been beautiful under other circumstances. Now Michael saw only tactical concerns: limited visibility, difficulty maneuvering if ambushed, restricted escape routes. Beside him, Eliza stirred, blinking away sleep. Where are we? She asked, voice husky. About 20 minutes from Kate's safe house, according to the GPS. Michael handed her a bottle of water from the center console. How are you holding up? She took a long drink before answering. Processing. It's one thing to discover patterns in data, another entirely to have those patterns actively trying to kill you. A weak smile crossed her lips. Not exactly what I expected when I accepted a job at Quantum Secure. Life rarely follows the expected path. Speaking from experience, Michael's hands tightened fractionally on the steering wheel. 3 years ago, I had my future mapped out. 20-year military career, maybe transition to private security afterward. Then an IED in a place I can't name during an operation that officially never happened changed everything. You lost your team? Not a question. Everyone but me. The familiar ache swelled in his chest. 7 good men, the best I've ever served with. Eliza was quiet for a moment, respecting the weight of his loss. And after, medical discharge, therapy, nightmares, he shrugged. Trying to build a life that made sense without a mission or a team. Not very successfully from the looks of it, she observed, but there was no judgment in her tone. Michael found himself smiling faintly. Not very successfully, he agreed. Until last night. Their eyes met briefly, mutual understanding passing between them. 2 people who had been adrift in different ways, suddenly anchored by purpose and shared danger. The GPS announced their final turn, an almost invisible dirt track that would have been easy to miss without precise coordinates. The SUV handled the rough terrain admirably as they climbed higher into the mountains. Kate mentioned you shut down a human trafficking ring, Eliza said after a while, breaking the comfortable silence. Was that before or after your discharge? After, about a year ago. Michael navigated around a fallen branch. I was in Eastern Europe for some security consulting work. Noticed patterns that didn't add up. Young women disappearing from certain villages, official investigations going nowhere. He shrugged. I started asking questions and found answers. Eventually, the operation spanned 3 countries, involved local police, border officials. They were moving girls through a network of safe houses, ultimately to buyers across Europe and the Middle East. You took it down alone? Michael shook his head. I gathered evidence, identified key players, reached out to some former contacts who connected me with people who could act on it. But you were the catalyst, Eliza noted. The one who saw the pattern and wouldn't let it go. Before Michael could respond, the trees opened to reveal a small clearing. Nestled against the mountainside stood a cabin, larger than he'd expected, constructed of heavy logs with a metal roof. Solar panels gleamed on the southern exposure, and a small wind turbine spun lazily on a nearby rise. The property was natural enough to blend with the surroundings, but strategically positioned to offer clear sight lines in all directions. Kate doesn't do anything halfway, Eliza observed as they pulled up to the cabin. Never has. Michael killed the engine, immediately conducting a visual sweep of the perimeter. Wait here until I clear the building. She nodded, watching as he retrieved the Glock from his waistband and approached the cabin with the measured movements of someone reactivating long-practiced skills. The key Kate had provided unlocked a reinforced door that opened silently on well-oiled hinges. The interior was surprisingly spacious. Open floor plan, modern amenities disguised within rustic aesthetics. More importantly, it was secure. Michael methodically checked each room, noting the escape routes, the hidden compartments for weapons and supplies, the communications equipment disguised as ordinary furnishings. When he was satisfied, he returned to the SUV and escorted Eliza inside. She moved immediately to the large wooden table dominating the main room, setting up her laptop and the external drive containing their precious data. Kate thought of everything, she murmured, discovering the satellite internet connection hidden within what appeared to be an antique radio. This isn't her first conspiracy, Michael replied, securing the perimeter by activating the cabin's surprisingly sophisticated security system. She's been preparing for something like this for years. People like you and Catherine, Eliza said, fingers already flying across her keyboard. You live in a different world than the rest of us, don't you? One where threats are always real, where precautions others would call paranoid are just Tuesday. Michael paused by the window, watching as clouds gathered over the distant peaks. We've seen the shadows most people don't notice. Once you've seen them, you can't unsee them. And now I've seen them too. There was a hint of wistfulness in her voice. No going back to blissful ignorance. Would you want to? If you could? She looked up from her computer, eyes resolute. No. Knowledge is power, even when it's painful. Especially then. Something shifted between them in that moment. A deeper connection forged in mutual understanding. They were now bound not just by circumstance and danger, but by a shared worldview. That difficult truth must be faced. That responsibility comes with awareness. The satellite phone Kate had provided chirped, breaking the moment. Michael answered to hear Kate's familiar voice. I'm clean and clear. ETA 3 hours. Any problems on your end? Negative. Perimeter secure, systems operational. Good. I've made contact with some people who might help us understand what we're dealing with. In the meantime, have Eliza focus on the financial transactions tied to something called Prometheus Acquisition. That might be our best lead on what Lazarus actually entails. Copy that. Michael glanced at Eliza, who was already nodding, having overheard. Watch yourself on the approach. Always do. And Michael? Kate's voice softened slightly. It's good to have you back in the game. The call ended. Michael relayed Kate's instructions, watching as Eliza immediately adjusted her search parameters. Outside, the first raindrops began to patter against the roof, a soothing counterpoint to the tension humming through the cabin. For the next few hours, they worked in companionable focus, Eliza mining the data for connections, while Michael secured their position, establishing defensive protocols and escape routes should they be compromised. The familiar rhythm of operational preparation centered him, pushing away the fog of purposelessness that had clouded his life for 3 years. By the time Kate arrived, rain was falling steadily, drumming against the metal roof in a hypnotic cadence. She entered carrying several bags of equipment and a determined expression. We've got company coming, she announced without preamble. Alexander Mercer, former CIA, now independent contractor. One of the few people I trust with something this big. Michael stiffened. Mercer? Are you sure that's wise? No, Kate admitted, setting down her gear. But we're short on options and time. And he has access to resources we need. Who is he? Eliza asked, looking between them. The man who ran Michael's last official operation, Kate explained. The one that ended with an IED and 7 dead operators. The silence that followed was thick enough to cut. Rain pounded against the windows, nature's percussion underscoring the tension in the room. He was following orders, Michael said finally, his voice carefully neutral. Just like we all were. Kate studied him with those penetrating eyes of hers. You've forgiven him, not forgiven. Understood. Michael turned to check the perimeter monitors. When will he arrive? Tomorrow morning, which gives us tonight to make sense of what we have. Kate moved to Eliza's workstation. Show me what you found on Prometheus. As the two women immersed themselves in data analysis, Michael stepped onto the covered porch, needing a moment alone. The rain had tapered to a gentle shower, releasing the rich scent of wet earth and pine. Mountains loomed as darker shadows against the twilight sky, ancient and indifferent to human concerns. Tomorrow he would face Alexander Mercer, the man who had sent his team into an ambush based on faulty intelligence. The man whose decisions had haunted Michael's nightmares for 3 years. Not an enemy exactly, but a physical embodiment of everything Michael had lost. And somehow they would need to work together to stop whatever Lazarus protocol was set to unleash in 5 days' time. Michael took a deep breath of mountain air, letting it center him. Personal feelings had no place in this equation. The mission parameters were clear. The stakes, global. Everything else, grief, anger, unresolved trauma, would have to wait. When he returned inside, Eliza looked up immediately, as if sensing his presence. Their eyes met across the room and something passed between them. Silent understanding, mutual resolve. Whatever came next, they would face it together. 5 days to save a world that didn't know it needed saving. For Michael Reeves, ex-soldier haunted by failure, it was the mission he'd been waiting for without knowing it. A chance for redemption, purpose, and perhaps, finally, peace. Dawn broke over the mountains with painful clarity, sunlight fracturing through pine branches to dapple the cabin's porch, where Michael stood nursing a cup of black coffee. He'd slept poorly, his dreams a chaotic blend of past and present. The explosion that had taken his team now somehow featuring Eliza in the aftermath, searching through rubble with bloodied hands. The sound of tires on gravel announced a vehicle's approach long before it came into view. Michael set down his coffee and positioned himself strategically, visible but with access to cover if needed. Old habits. A nondescript black sedan emerged from the tree line, moving deliberately along the narrow access road. Even at this distance, Michael recognized the driving style. Cautious but confident, maintaining optimal maneuverability, military precision. The car stopped at the designated point, engine idling for 30 seconds before shutting off. The driver's door opened, and Alexander Mercer unfolded his tall frame with the careful movements of a man who'd recently been injured. His hair had more silver than Michael remembered, his face more lined, but his posture remained ramrod straight, a lifetime of military discipline evident in every movement. Their eyes met across the clearing, and for a moment, neither man moved. 3 years of unspoken history stretched between them like an invisible tether. Mercer was the first to break the tableau, raising his hand in a simple greeting that was neither military nor casual. Acknowledgement between equals. Michael returned the gesture, feeling something tight in his chest loosen fractionally. "Reeves," Mercer said as he approached, voice exactly as Michael remembered, graveled by years of command and too many cigarettes. "You're looking better than the last time I saw you." "Hospital beds don't flatter anyone," Michael replied, extending his hand after only a moment's hesitation. Mercer's grip was firm, his eyes searching Michael's face. "I never expected you to shake my hand again." "Neither did I." The simple honesty seemed appropriate. "Things change when the world's at stake." A smile ghosted across Mercer's weathered features. "Some things never change. You're still leading with the mission." The cabin door opened behind them, revealing Kate with a mug of coffee in one hand and what Michael suspected was a concealed weapon in the other. "If you two are done with the reunion, we have work to do." Mercer's smile widened slightly. "Winters, still the warmest welcome in the intelligence community, I see?" "Only for people who get my operatives killed," she replied, but there was no real heat in her tone. "Professional differences rather than personal animosity." "Fair enough." Mercer sobered. "You mentioned Lazarus Protocol. That's not a name I expected to hear in this lifetime." "You know what it is?" Michael asked sharply. "Not what? Who?" Mercer accepted the coffee Kate reluctantly offered. Lazarus was a Black Ops project from the Cold War era, a sleeper cell program, but with a twist. Instead of embedding agents in enemy territory, Lazarus embedded ideas, contingency plans designed to activate under specific conditions, generations after the original architects were gone. "What kind of contingency plans?" Kate asked. Mercer's expression darkened. "The kind designed to reshape global power structures in the event of certain failures. Economic manipulation, strategic resource control, targeted elimination of key figures." He sipped his coffee, It was theoretical when I encountered references to it 15 years ago. Something that existed on paper but was never implemented. Well, it's not theoretical anymore, came Eliza's voice from the doorway. She stood with her laptop cradled in one arm, looking sleep-deprived but determined, and it's scheduled to activate in less than 5 days. Mercer studied her with professional assessment. You must be the data analyst. Catherine said you're the one who put the pieces together. Some of them? Eliza moved forward, offering her hand. Eliza Chen. Alexander Mercer. He shook her hand briefly. Let's see what you've got. Inside the cabin, they gathered around the large table where Eliza had set up her workstation. Screens displayed interlocking data patterns, financial transactions, personnel movements, and communications intercepts. A digital mosaic that painted a disturbing picture. Prometheus Acquisition is the financial component, Eliza explained, highlighting a series of transactions. Over the past 18 months, a network of shell companies has been systematically acquiring controlling interests in key resource sectors. Water rights in 3 continents, rare earth mineral deposits, strategic shipping infrastructure. Classic resource consolidation, Kate noted. Preparing for scarcity or creating it? Creating it, Mercer said grimly. That was always the Lazarus endgame. Engineer a crisis, then emerge as the solution, with new power structures in place. Michael studied the pattern of targeted eliminations Eliza had identified. These individuals, the ones being removed or neutralized. They're not random. No, Eliza agreed. They're potential disruptors. People with the knowledge, authority, or platform to recognize and expose the pattern. Intelligence analysts, investigative journalists, specific military commanders, even a few corporate whistleblowers. And me, Michael said quietly. Why am I on this list? I've been out of the game for years. Mercer and Kate exchanged a glance that didn't escape Michael's notice. What aren't you telling me? He pressed. Mercer sighed, setting down his coffee. The operation in Nur-Sultan, your final mission. It wasn't just about disrupting a terrorist cell. What was it about then? You were sent to recover data, specifically documentation about Lazarus Protocol that had surfaced in Kazakhstan. Your team wasn't supposed to know the true objective. Only the mission commander had that information. Cold realization washed over Michael. Captain Hayes. He knew. Mercer nodded. Hayes was briefed about recovering documentation with special classification. He wasn't told what it contained. The explosion, Michael said slowly, pieces clicking into place. It wasn't random. It was targeted at us. We believe so, yes. Someone knew you were getting close to Lazarus material and took action. Mercer's expression was grim. Your survival was probably an oversight they've been monitoring ever since, waiting to see if you had any knowledge of what your team had been sent to recover. The implications cascaded through Michael's mind. His team hadn't died in a random act of war. They'd been deliberately eliminated to protect a decades-old conspiracy. The randomness that had tortured him for years, why he had survived when better men died, suddenly had purpose. Not comfort, but clarity. So when I helped Eliza, Michael said, it confirmed their suspicions that I might know something, and elevated you from person of interest to active threat, Kate concluded, which is why we need to move quickly. Once they realize their tracker is following a false trail, they'll deploy more resources to find you both. Eliza, who had been silent during this exchange, finally spoke. Based on the data patterns, I believe Lazarus Protocol involves 3 phases: resource control, strategic eliminations, and then some kind of trigger event, something that creates enough global instability to allow their new power structures to emerge naturally. A trigger event scheduled for 5 days from now, Michael added. What could create that level of instability? Mercer turned to one of the screens. Show me the military asset movements you've tracked. Eliza pulled up a map showing subtle troop repositioning, naval deployments, and Air Force readiness changes across multiple countries. Nothing obvious to casual observation, but when viewed collectively, a pattern emerged. They're creating a powder keg, Kate murmured, positioning assets in ways that maximize response to a crisis. Not just any crisis, Mercer said, studying the pattern with growing alarm. These deployments are consistent with preparation for a decapitation strike, taking out political leadership in multiple countries simultaneously. A heavy silence fell over the cabin as the enormity of what they were facing sank in. Not just conspiracy, but potentially coordinated assassination of world leaders, an event that would throw the international order into chaos. We need to warn them, Eliza said, breaking the silence. The targets, whoever they are. With what evidence? Mercer challenged. Patterns in data? Financial transactions? We have indicators but no smoking gun. No names of the actual Lazarus controllers. No specific threat details. So we find the smoking gun, Michael said with quiet determination. We have 5 days to identify the exact nature of the trigger event, locate proof that can't be ignored, and get it to people who can act on it. Kate's expression was skeptical. That's a tall order, even for us. What's the alternative? Michael demanded. Stand by and watch while they reshape the world through assassination and manufactured crisis? That's not who we are. The simple declaration hung in the air. Not a question of capability, but of identity. Who they were at their core. What they stood for. Michael felt 3 pairs of eyes on him, measuring his resolve. All right, Mercer said finally. We need to track the command structure. Find out who's giving the orders, where they're coordinating. That's our best chance of identifying the specific trigger event. I can work backward from the financial transactions, Eliza offered. Follow the money to its source. And I have contacts who can help us access communications we're not seeing, Kate added, already reaching for her satellite phone. Like that, they were a team. 4 individuals united by purpose, each bringing unique skills to a mission with impossible odds and the highest possible stakes. Michael felt something he hadn't experienced since before the explosion. Belonging. The bone-deep certainty of standing exactly where he was meant to be, with people he would trust with his life. As they dispersed to their tasks, Eliza caught Michael's eye across the room. A silent exchange passed between them. Recognition of how far they'd come since that rainy night outside a convenience store, and how much further they had yet to go. 5 days to prevent global catastrophe. The clock was ticking. Night had fallen over the mountains, bringing with it a crystalline clarity to the star-filled sky. Inside the cabin, tension and purpose filled the air in equal measure as their small team worked through the enormous task before them. Michael stepped onto the porch, needing a moment of fresh air after hours hunched over intelligence reports and data analyses. The cool mountain breeze carried the scent of pine and distant snow, a welcome respite from the increasingly claustrophobic atmosphere inside. He wasn't surprised when the door opened behind him. Some part of him had expected, perhaps even hoped for, Eliza's company. Kate says I should sleep, she said, joining him at the railing. My brain apparently doesn't process data effectively after 20 hours without rest. She's probably right. Probably. Eliza made no move to return inside. Instead, she tilted her face upward, studying the stars with wonder. You can actually see the Milky Way out here. I forgot what that looks like. Michael followed her gaze to the luminous band stretching across the night sky. It helps with perspective. Remembering how small we are in the grand scheme, and yet here we are, 4 people trying to save the world. A hint of wonder colored her voice. Is this what your life was like before? High stakes, impossible odds, the fate of nations hanging in the balance? Not exactly. Michael found himself smiling slightly. Usually there were more resources, clearer objectives, and better odds. But the same feeling? This mixture of terror and exhilaration? He considered this. Yes, that part is familiar. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, shoulders nearly touching as they shared the vastness of the night sky. Michael was acutely aware of her presence, not just physically, but the quiet strength she carried, the brilliant mind that had pieced together what seasoned intelligence professionals had missed. I've been thinking about what happens after, Eliza said finally. If we succeed, after is a luxury we earn by surviving now. Very poetic, but not very practical. She turned to face him, her expression serious in the starlight. If we expose Lazarus, if we stop whatever they're planning, there will be consequences for all of us. Michael understood her concern. You're worried about retaliation. I'm worried about disappearing into a black site somewhere, never to be heard from again, she corrected, or being discredited so thoroughly that no one ever believes anything I say. These people have resources, influence. We have contingencies for that, Michael assured her. Kate's been setting up information dead drops and time releases. If anything happens to any of us, the full story goes public through multiple channels. Mutually assured destruction. Eliza's smile didn't reach her eyes. Cold comfort, but effective. Michael hesitated, then added quietly, I won't let anything happen to you, Eliza. Whatever comes after, you won't face it alone. Something shifted in her expression. Surprise followed by a deeper emotion he couldn't quite name. That's quite a promise from someone I met 3 days ago. Some connections don't need time. The words emerged before he could consider them. Honest in a way he rarely allowed himself to be. Eliza studied him with those perceptive eyes of hers. No, she agreed softly. Some don't. The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibilities. In another world under different circumstances, perhaps they would have explored this connection further. But here now, with the weight of global conspiracy pressing down upon them, there was only the acknowledgement of what might have been. The cabin door opened, breaking the spell. Kate stood silhouetted against the warm light from inside. We've got something, she announced without preamble. Mercer found a communication pattern. Coordinated message bursts at specific intervals, bouncing through satellites most intelligence agencies don't monitor. They followed her inside to where Mercer was studying a global map with plotted signal points. These communications use an encryption protocol I haven't seen in 20 years, he explained. Cold War era, developed for worst-case scenario communications between deep cover assets. Can you break it? Michael asked. Already have. Mercer's satisfaction was evident. Most of it is operational chatter, confirmation codes, status checks. But there's one recurring reference that stands out. Summit contingency. Eliza frowned. Summit? As in mountaintop? As in the Global Security Summit, Kate corrected grimly. Scheduled 4 days from now in Geneva, bringing together heads of state from 12 countries, including the US, Russia, China, and key European nations. The implications hit Michael with physical force. The perfect target for a decapitation strike. Multiple world leaders in one location. Exactly, Mercer confirmed. And according to these communications, something called the package is already in position. A cold silence fell over the room as they absorbed the horrifying clarity of what they were facing. Not theoretical anymore, but terrifyingly specific. A planned attack on the Global Security Summit, designed to eliminate world leaders and throw international relations into chaos. We need to warn them, Eliza said, echoing her earlier sentiment but with newfound urgency. With what proof? Kate challenged. Intercepted communications they'll dismiss as forgeries? Data patterns that require expertise to interpret? We need something concrete, names, locations, the exact nature of the package. Geneva, Michael said, mind already shifting to tactical planning. We need to get to Geneva. Find the package, secure physical evidence, identify the trigger mechanism. Mercer nodded slowly. It's the only play, but getting there won't be easy. He'll be watching airports, train stations, border crossings. I have contacts who can help with that, Kate said. People who specialize in moving individuals off the grid. But it will take time to arrange. Time we don't have much of. Then we split up, Michael suggested. Kate, you and Mercer work your contacts, arrange transportation and credentials. Eliza and I will head toward Geneva now, using less monitored routes. You can catch up once the arrangements are in place. The strategy made tactical sense, but also served another purpose. Dividing their knowledge and resources so that if one team was compromised, the other could still complete the mission? Risky, Mercer observed, but sensible. I have safe houses in Europe we can use as rendezvous points. And I have emergency identities that should hold up to scrutiny. Kate added, already moving toward her equipment bags. Give me an hour to get everything prepared. As they dispersed to prepare, Michael found himself alone with Eliza once more. The weight of what lay ahead hung between them. A desperate journey to Geneva, facing unknown dangers with the fate of world leaders hanging in the balance. Are you sure about this? He asked quietly. Once we leave this cabin, everything gets exponentially more dangerous. Eliza's expression was resolute. I've been sure since the moment I found the first pattern in the data. Some things are worth any risk. Michael studied her face, committing it to memory. The intelligence in her eyes, the determination set of her mouth, the quiet courage that had brought her this far. In just 3 days, this woman had reawakened something he thought had died along with his team in that explosion. Purpose, yes, but also the capacity to care deeply about something beyond his own pain. Then we'd better get ready, he said simply. We have a world to save. Outside, the stars continued their ancient patterns, indifferent to human conspiracies. Inside, 4 individuals prepared to challenge those who would reshape global power through violence and chaos. The odds remained nearly impossible, the dangers very real. But for Michael Reeves, ex-soldier haunted by past failure, the path ahead had never been clearer. The journey to Geneva unfolded like a shadow war, a series of calculated movements across borders and jurisdictions, always one step ahead of those hunting them. Michael and Eliza traveled by less conventional means. Freight trains, rural bus routes, a fishing boat across a fog-shrouded lake. Kate and Mercer would follow later, taking more direct routes once their specialized documentation was in place. 3 days before the summit, Michael and Eliza found themselves in a small apartment in the outskirts of Geneva, one of Mercer's safe houses, unused for years but maintained through layers of shell companies and trusted local contacts. Not exactly five-star accommodations, Michael observed as they entered the sparse living space. But it's secure. Eliza set down her backpack, rolling her shoulders to release the tension of constant travel. At this point, I'd sleep on concrete if it meant staying in one place for more than 6 hours. The apartment was functional rather than comfortable. Basic furnishings, secure communications equipment hidden within ordinary-looking electronics, and emergency supplies cached in concealed compartments. Most importantly, it had no digital footprint that could be traced to either of them. Michael conducted a thorough security check, confirming that the apartment's safeguards remained intact. Meanwhile, Eliza set up her laptop, connecting to the secure network Kate had established for their communications. Kate and Mercer should be here tomorrow morning, she reported, checking encrypted messages. They've made contact with someone inside the summit security team, a former colleague of Mercer's who might help us access the venue for reconnaissance. Michael nodded, continuing his methodical inspection of the apartment. When he was satisfied with their security, he finally allowed himself to relax marginally, sinking into a chair across from Eliza. "We need a concrete plan for identifying the package," he said. "The summit venue will be massive, with multiple potential targets. Based on the communications patterns Mercer intercepted, I believe we're looking for something already in place." Eliza replied, pulling up schematics of the summit venue, the historic Palais des Nations. Most likely something disguised as ordinary infrastructure or equipment. A bomb? Possible, but unlikely given the security protocols. Bomb-sniffing dogs, chemical detectors, regular sweeps. She frowned thoughtfully. "I'm thinking something more insidious, perhaps biological or chemical in nature, designed to be released during the summit." The thought chilled Michael. His military training had covered various WMD scenarios, but the clinical training exercises hadn't captured the horror of what such weapons could do in reality. "If that's the case, we need specialized equipment to detect it," he noted. "Not something we can easily acquire without drawing attention. Perhaps Kate's contact on the security team can help with that." Eliza rubbed her eyes, fatigue evident in the gesture. "In the meantime, we should rest while we can. Tomorrow will be challenging." Michael studied her with concern. Over the past days of travel, he'd watched her transform from a brilliant analyst into something more. A field operative by necessity, adapting to their dangerous circumstances with remarkable resilience. But the strain was showing in the shadows beneath her eyes, the tension she carried in her shoulders. "You should take the bedroom," he offered. "I'll keep watch from here." "You need rest too, Michael." Her voice softened. "We can take shifts. I'm used to operating on minimal sleep. And I'm used to 72-hour data mining sessions fueled by nothing but coffee and determination." His smile touched her lips. "We're both stubborn, it seems." The observation drew an unexpected laugh from Michael, perhaps the first genuine laugh he'd experienced in years. Stubborn is one word for it. Something in his expression must have surprised her, because her smile widened. "You should do that more often." "Do what?" "Laugh. It transforms your face." She tilted her head slightly. "For a moment there, I could see who you were before everything happened." The observation caught him off guard. Most people in his post-military life had only known the guarded, withdrawn version of himself. Eliza somehow saw beneath that surface to the person he'd once been. The Michael Reeves who had led with confidence, who had found joy in life despite its dangers. "That person seems very far away sometimes," he admitted quietly. "He's still there." Her certainty was unexpected. "I've seen him emerge more and more these past few days. When you're focused on the mission, when you're protecting others, that's when he shows himself." Michael found himself without a ready response. This woman whom he'd known for less than a week somehow understood aspects of himself he'd been unable to articulate in 3 years of therapy. "We should both get some rest," he said finally, uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation, yet strangely moved by it. "I'll take first watch. Wake you in 4 hours." Eliza seemed about to argue, but then nodded, recognizing the wisdom of the suggestion. 4 hours, not a minute more. "Promise me." "I promise." As she disappeared into the bedroom, Michael positioned himself near the window, maintaining a careful vigil on the street below. The neighborhood was quiet, residential, seemingly ordinary, but he knew better than to trust appearances. Somewhere in this peaceful city, people were preparing to unleash chaos that would reshape global power structures. and only a handful of people stood in their way. The weight of responsibility should have been crushing. Instead, Michael found it clarifying. For the first time since that IED had shattered his world, he felt fully present, fully engaged with his purpose. The fog of depression and purposelessness that had clouded his existence for 3 years had lifted, burned away by the urgency of their mission, and he had to admit, by Eliza's unwavering belief in his capabilities. 4 hours later, true to his word, Michael gently woke Eliza. Their exchange was brief. Status update, security observations, a reminder to wake him if anything changed. As he settled onto the narrow bed still warm from her presence, Michael found himself drifting towards sleep with surprising ease. His last conscious thought was of Eliza's words. I've seen him emerge more and more these past few days. Perhaps she was right. Perhaps the person he'd been wasn't lost after all, just buried beneath layers of grief and guilt, waiting for the right purpose, the right person, to help bring him back to life. Dawn broke over Geneva with soft golden light illuminating the distant Alps and glinting off Lake Geneva. Michael stood at the apartment window, freshly showered and alert despite the limited sleep, watching the city come to life below. In 2 days, world leaders would gather less than 3 miles from where he stood, unknowingly walking into a trap designed to throw the international order into chaos. The sound of the apartment door's security system disengaging drew his attention. His hand moved automatically to the weapon concealed at his waist, relaxing only when Kate's familiar voice called out the predetermined all-clear phrase. The weather in Stockholm is lovely this time of year. Better than Copenhagen, I hear. Michael responded with the correct countersign, moving to greet their colleagues. Kate entered first, looking remarkably fresh considering their circumstances. Behind her came Mercer, accompanied by a third individual, a trim, middle-aged man with the alert posture of someone accustomed to security work. This is Henri Dufresne, Mercer introduced him. Former French intelligence, currently deputy head of security for the summit, and an old friend who owes me several favors. Dufresne nodded briskly. Alexander has explained the situation. If what you suspect is true, we have very little time. Eliza emerged from the kitchen area, coffee mug in hand. You believe us? Let's say I find your evidence compelling enough to investigate. Dufresne replied diplomatically, particularly given recent anomalies in the summit preparation protocols. What kind of anomalies? Michael asked sharply. Last-minute personnel changes, equipment substitutions, unusual access granted to third-party contractors. Dufresne spread his hands. Nothing definitively suspicious when viewed individually, but collectively. A pattern, Eliza finished, just like the data signatures I've been tracking. Kate unfolded a detailed floor plan of the Palais des Nations on the apartment's small dining table. Henri has arranged limited access credentials for us. Maintenance and technical support roles that will allow us to move through most areas without raising alarms. Not the highest security zones, Dufresne clarified, but enough to conduct preliminary surveillance. If we find evidence of a threat, I can escalate appropriately through official channels. When can we get in? Michael asked, already studying the floor plan and identifying potential vulnerability points. Today, final security preparations are underway, which means plenty of contractor activity that we can blend with. Dufresne checked his watch. We should move within the hour to align with shift changes. The next 45 minutes were a flurry of focused preparation. Kate distributed their cover identities and credentials. Michael and Mercer as security system technicians, Eliza as an IT specialist, Kate as part of the translation equipment team. Dufresne provided them with earpieces disguised as standard security communication devices, allowing them to maintain contact throughout the complex. What about detection equipment? Michael asked. If we're looking for chemical or biological agents, we need specialized tools. Already arranged, Dufresne replied, producing what appeared to be ordinary tablets. These have been modified with advanced sensors capable of detecting a range of CBRN agents. They appear to be standard inventory management devices used by maintenance personnel. As they prepared to depart, Michael found himself alongside Eliza, who was carefully concealing her specialized equipment within a standard technician's toolkit. Nervous? He asked quietly. She considered the question seriously. Not nervous. Focused. This is what everything has been leading to since I first discovered those data patterns. Her hands stilled momentarily. Though I admit, field operations are somewhat outside my usual expertise. You've adapted remarkably well for someone who normally works behind a desk. A smile touched her lips. Necessity is a powerful teacher. She glanced at him. Besides, I have an excellent guide. Before Michael could respond, Kate signaled that it was time to move. They left the apartment in staggered departures. Dufresne first, followed by Kate and Mercer, with Michael and Eliza departing last. Standard protocol to avoid drawing attention to their group. The journey to the Palais des Nations passed without incident. The historic building complex, home to the United Nations office at Geneva, sprawled impressively along the lakeshore. Even 2 days before the summit, security was visibly enhanced, barricades being established, surveillance systems being tested, security personnel conducting sweeps of the grounds. Dufresne guided them through a service entrance, their credentials passing initial scrutiny without issue. Once inside, they separated according to their cover roles, maintaining communication through their disguised earpieces. Remember, Mercer's voice came through clearly. We're looking for anything that seems out of place. Recent installations, equipment that doesn't match specifications, restricted areas with unusual access patterns. Focus particularly on air handling systems, water supply infrastructure, and electronic equipment near the main conference rooms, Eliza added. Based on the intercepted communications, the package is likely integrated with existing systems. Michael moved through the building with practiced efficiency, his cover as a security system technician, providing natural access to junction boxes, control panels, and other potential vulnerability points. He methodically scanned each area with the disguised detection equipment, finding nothing amiss until he reached the east wing of the complex. I'm getting unusual readings near the primary conference hall, he reported quietly. Some kind of chemical signature the system can't identify. Same here, Kate's voice responded, specifically around the new translation booth equipment that was installed yesterday. The translation system, Eliza's voice carried sudden urgency. That's it. The summit will feature 12 world leaders speaking 6 different languages. Everyone will be using translation headsets. A delivery mechanism hidden in plain sight, Mercer concluded, capable of targeting only those wearing the headsets, primarily the leaders and their key staff. We need to examine that equipment, Michael said, already moving toward the conference hall. Without alerting whoever might be monitoring, meet me at Junction E7, Dufresne instructed. I can get us access to the translation control room. Michael navigated through service corridors, maintaining his cover identity when passing other workers. The Palais des Nations was a labyrinth of historic architecture, retrofitted with modern security. Beautiful but challenging to navigate quickly. At Junction E7, he rendezvoused with Dufresne, Eliza, and Kate. Mercer's voice came through their earpieces. I'll maintain perimeter awareness. If anyone starts taking unusual interest in your activities, I'll provide warning. Dufresne led them through a restricted access door into a modern control room filled with audio-visual equipment. Banks of monitors displayed the empty conference hall from multiple angles, while racks of electronic equipment hummed quietly along one wall. This is the central hub for the translation system, Dufresne explained. From here, audio is routed to interpreter booths, then redistributed to individual headsets in the conference hall. Eliza immediately moved to the equipment racks, her tablet scanning for anomalies. There, she said after a moment, pointing to a sleek black module that looks slightly newer than the surrounding equipment. That's not standard translation hardware. Michael joined her, examining the device without touching it. Looks like it's been designed to integrate seamlessly with the existing system. Most technicians would assume it's part of an upgrade. Kate was already photographing the device from multiple angles. Can we access it without triggering any alerts? Not without knowing what safeguards it might have, Eliza cautioned. If it's as sophisticated as the rest of this operation, tampering could trigger a failsafe, either destroying evidence or worse, causing premature activation. We need to know exactly what it does, Michael said, frustration evident in his voice. Without that specific information, we can't convince Summit Security to shut down the entire conference. Dufresne studied the device thoughtfully. Perhaps we don't need to access it directly. If we can identify the manufacturer or origin, already working on it, Eliza said, her tablet scanning the visible external components. The external housing had been carefully anonymized, but she paused, eyes widening. Wait, I recognize this configuration. It's similar to a prototype chemical aerosol system that was being developed by Nexus Dynamics. The defense contractor? Kate asked. Yes. They were working on non-lethal crowd control technologies, specifically aerosols that could be dispersed through building ventilation systems. Eliza's fingers flew across her tablet. The project was officially discontinued 3 years ago after ethical concerns were raised. Officially discontinued? Michael repeated. But perhaps continued under different auspices. Nexus Dynamics? Mercer's voice came through their earpieces. one of the corporations Eliza identified in the financial data related to Prometheus acquisition. The pieces were connecting, the conspiracy taking clearer shape. A defense corporation developing delivery systems for chemical agents, financial transactions linking them to Lazarus Protocol, and now a suspicious device integrated into the summit's translation system. We need a sample of whatever this device is designed to deliver, Kate said. Without that, we're still working on circumstantial evidence. Dufresne nodded. I can request a specialized CBRN team, but that will alert my superiors. If there are conspirators within Summit security, then we risk tipping our hand before we have concrete proof, Michael finished. He studied the device thoughtfully. There must be a reservoir for whatever agent it's designed to disperse. If we can extract a small sample without disturbing the system, a sudden alert from Mercer interrupted their planning. We have a situation. Security personnel are conducting an unscheduled sweep of all technical areas, moving with purpose toward your location. Time to exit. How long? Michael asked sharply. 3 minutes, maybe less. Dufresne moved immediately to the door. We need to leave. Now. Being discovered here would compromise everything. Wait, Eliza said, still focused on the device. I need 30 seconds. Before anyone could stop her, she had connected her tablet to a port on the adjacent control system. What are you doing? Kate demanded. Creating a backdoor into the translation system's diagnostics? Eliza explained, fingers flying across the screen. If I can access the control protocols remotely, we might be able to neutralize this device without physically tampering with it. 20 seconds, Mercer warned. Michael positioned himself near the door, ready to create a diversion if necessary. Kate joined Dufresne in gathering their equipment, erasing any evidence of their presence. Done, Eliza announced, disconnecting her tablet. Let's go! They exited the control room seconds before the security team rounded the corner, smoothly transitioning back to their cover roles. As they separated to avoid drawing attention, Michael heard Eliza's voice softly through his earpiece. I know what it is, and it's worse than we thought. Back at the safe house, Eliza connected her tablet to their secure network, displaying her findings on the apartment's small television screen. The atmosphere was tense as they gathered around, awaiting her explanation. It's not just one chemical agent. She began displaying molecular structures that meant little to Michael, but clearly disturbed both Mercer and Kate. It's a binary compound, 2 separate chemicals that are harmless individually but lethal when combined. Like sarin nerve agent, Mercer observed grimly. Similar principle but more sophisticated. Based on the diagnostic data I accessed, the device is designed to release these compounds simultaneously through the translation headsets, specifically through the cushioned earpieces, which would allow absorption through the skin. Symptoms? Michael asked, tactical mind already assessing what they would be facing. According to the limited data I could access, initial neurological impairment, dizziness, disorientation, followed by respiratory distress and cardiac arrhythmia. Death would occur within 10 to 15 minutes. The clinical description couldn't mask the horror of what they were facing. A sophisticated assassination system designed to simultaneously eliminate 12 world leaders in a very public setting. And the trigger mechanism? Kate pressed. Remote activation, with a backup timer set for approximately noon on the opening day of the summit, when all delegation heads will be present for the inaugural session. Eliza's expression was grim. We have approximately 36 hours. Dufresne, who had been silent until now, spoke up. I must take this to the summit security director immediately. This is beyond what I can handle alone. And if the security director is compromised? Mercer challenged. We still don't know how high this conspiracy reaches. We have evidence now, Dufresne countered. Specific technical details that can be verified. Evidence that could be buried, dismissed as a technical misinterpretation. Kate argued, we need more. Specifically, we need to identify who is behind this. The actual operatives who will be on site to ensure the plan succeeds. Michael, who had been studying Eliza's technical data, looked up. The device will need a final check before activation. Standard procedure for any operation this complex, a last-minute confirmation that everything is functioning as intended, which means someone with appropriate access will need to physically visit the control room, Eliza concluded, following his logic. Exactly. Probably within the next 24 hours during final preparations. Michael turned to Dufresne. Does the control room have surveillance cameras? Yes, but footage is restricted to senior security personnel. Can you access it without alerting others? Dufresne hesitated. Possibly. For a limited time without raising flags. Then that's our next step. Michael decided. Monitor the control room. Identify whoever comes to verify the device. They'll lead us to the broader conspiracy. Meanwhile, I can work on a neutralization protocol. Eliza added, now that I have access to the system's diagnostics, I might be able to remotely disable the delivery mechanism without alerting the operators. A two-pronged approach. Mercer nodded approvingly. Identify the operatives while preparing to neutralize the threat. Kate was already assembling surveillance equipment from their supplies. Henri and I will handle the camera access. Michael, you and Eliza focus on the neutralization protocol. Alexander, we need you to prepare our evidence package. Something compelling enough that it can't be ignored or buried once we identify the conspirators. The room transformed into a coordinated operations center. Each person focused on their specific task with the practiced efficiency of professionals accustomed to high-stakes missions. Michael found himself working alongside Eliza, analyzing the technical specifications she had extracted from the translation system. Can you really disable it remotely? He asked quietly, conscious of the immense pressure on her shoulders. Her fingers never paused in their movement across the keyboard. Theoretically, yes. The system requires network connectivity for synchronized operation across multiple translation booths. That connectivity is its vulnerability. She glanced up briefly. But they'll have fail-safes, redundancies. We need to identify and neutralize all of them. If anyone can do it, it's you. The simple vote of confidence came naturally. Eliza's hands stilled momentarily, her eyes meeting his. 3 years ago, I was analyzing consumer purchasing patterns to help companies target their advertising more effectively. Now I'm trying to prevent a global assassination plot. A small, incredulous laugh escaped her. Life takes unexpected turns. Remind me to thank you properly when this is over, Michael said, allowing himself a brief smile. For dragging me back into the land of the living. Mutual gratitude, she replied softly. I wouldn't have survived that first night without you. The moment of connection amid crisis reminded Michael of countless similar exchanges during his military service. The human connections forged under pressure that often proved stronger than those developed over years of ordinary interaction. He and Eliza had known each other less than a week, yet he trusted her in ways he hadn't trusted anyone since his team was lost. Their work continued through the afternoon and into evening. Dufresne and Kate successfully established remote access to the control room surveillance, setting up automated alerts that would notify them of any activity. Mercer compiled their evidence into a comprehensive briefing, ready to be delivered to trusted authorities once they had identified the key conspirators. As night fell over Geneva, they established a rotation for monitoring the surveillance feed. Michael took the first watch, positioned at the small desk with multiple screens showing the empty control room from different angles. The hours passed slowly. Midnight came and went. The city outside grew quiet, the peaceful calm belying the deadly plot they were working to uncover. In the apartment's bedroom, Eliza had finally succumbed to exhaustion, while Kate and Mercer rested on improvised bedding in the living area. Dufresne had returned to his own residence to maintain appearances, ready to return at the first sign of activity. At 2:17 a.m., a time that sent an uncomfortable shiver of recognition through Michael, movement on the surveillance feed caught his attention. A figure in maintenance coveralls entered the control room, moving with purpose directly to the equipment rack containing the suspicious device. Michael triggered the alert, instantly waking the others. They gathered around the surveillance feed, watching intently as the individual, face partially obscured by a cap, opened the equipment panel and connected what appeared to be a diagnostic device. Can we get a clearer image? Kate asked, leaning closer to the screen. Reiki? Working on it? Eliza replied, fingers flying across her keyboard as she enhanced and stabilized the video feed. The maintenance worker completed whatever verification they were performing, disconnected their equipment, and closed the panel. As they turned to leave, they adjusted their cap, momentarily exposing their face to one of the cameras. Freeze that frame, Mercer instructed sharply. Eliza captured the image, enhancing it further. A woman's face emerged from the digital enhancement, mid-40s with sharp features and cold efficiency in her expression. I know her, Dufresne said, his voice tight with shock. That's Sophia Keller. She's part of the summit's technical advisory team, brought in 6 months ago to consult on security protocols. Perfect position to install the device without raising suspicions. Kate noted grimly. Mercer was already running the image through a facial recognition database on his secure laptop. Sophia Keller is an alias. Her real name is Vera Petrov. Former Russian intelligence reportedly died in a car accident 5 years ago. Reportedly? Michael echoed. But actually reassigned to Lazarus Protocol. They watched as Petrov exited the control room, moving with unhurried confidence through the empty corridors. "We need to follow her," Michael said. "She'll lead us to others." The building's surveillance network can track her movements, Dufresne confirmed, already accessing additional camera feeds. "But we need to be careful. If she detects surveillance, she might accelerate the timeline." For the next hour, they tracked Petrov through the Palais des Nations and out into the pre-dawn streets of Geneva. She took a circuitous route, employing counter-surveillance techniques that confirmed her professional training before eventually entering a luxury hotel near Lake Geneva. The Beau Rivage, Dufresne identified. Many of the summit delegations have booked rooms there. "Perfect cover," Mercer observed, "hiding among the very people they're targeting." "We need eyes inside that hotel," Michael said, already formulating a plan. "Identify who she meets with, gather evidence of conspiracy." "I can arrange access," Dufresne offered. "The hotel's security director is a former colleague. But we'll need to move quickly." As the first light of dawn brightened the eastern sky, their plan took shape. Kate and Dufresne would establish surveillance on the hotel, identifying Petrov's associates. Michael and Mercer would prepare to intercept and neutralize the conspirators once identified. Eliza would continue working on remotely disabling the chemical delivery system, their fallback if direct intervention failed. 24 hours until the summit begins, Michael reminded them as they prepared to move out. 24 hours to prevent a global catastrophe. As the others gathered their equipment, Eliza caught Michael's arm, drawing him slightly aside. "Be careful," she said quietly. "These people have killed to protect this operation. They won't hesitate to eliminate anyone who threatens it." "I've been careful for 3 years," he replied. "Avoiding risk, avoiding engagement. Look where it got me." His hand briefly covered hers. "Some things are worth the risk, Eliza." She held his gaze for a long moment, something unspoken passing between them. "Just make sure you come back. We have unfinished business, you and I." "Count on it," he promised, allowing himself to briefly imagine a future beyond the immediate crisis. A future that, perhaps for the first time in 3 years, held possibilities worth exploring. As they departed the safe house, moving into position for the final phase of their desperate mission, Michael felt the weight of responsibility balanced by newfound purpose. The ex-soldier who had saved a stranger from a robbery had found himself at the center of a global conspiracy. But more importantly, he had found his way back to the person he was always meant to be, someone who made a difference when it mattered most. The clock was ticking, the final confrontation approached, and the fate of world leaders, perhaps the world itself, hung in the balance. The Beau Rivage Hotel represented old-world European luxury, marble columns, crystal chandeliers, impeccable service, and the discreet security expected by its wealthy and powerful clientele. By mid-morning, Michael and Mercer had established positions in the lobby, disguised as members of the summit's advanced security team, courtesy of credentials Dufresne had arranged. Kate maintained surveillance from the hotel's cafe, positioned to observe the main entrance and elevators, while Dufresne coordinated with his contact in hotel security to monitor internal cameras. Eliza remained at the safe house, working remotely on the neutralization protocol for the chemical delivery system while maintaining communications with the field team. "Petrov is in suite 712, Kate's voice came through their concealed earpieces. "Hasn't left since she arrived this morning." Hotel records show the suite is registered to a Canadian energy corporation. North Star Resources, Dufresne added. They're listed as summit observers, not primary participants. "Perfect cover," Mercer observed quietly, maintaining his position near the concierge desk. Corporate observers have access without the intense scrutiny given to government delegations. Michael, positioned near the elevators, maintained a casual vigilance while processing tactical options. "Any other rooms connected to North Star?" 3 more suites on the same floor, Dufresne confirmed. "All occupied according to hotel systems. A full operational team," Mercer concluded. "Suggests we're dealing with at least 4 primary conspirators on site." As they maintained their surveillance, diplomatic delegations began arriving for the summit's preliminary meetings scheduled for that afternoon. Security details, media representatives, and technical staff flowed through the lobby in well-choreographed patterns, creating a complex environment that both complicated their surveillance and provided additional cover. "Movement from 712, Kate reported suddenly. "Petrov is exiting the suite." Michael watched as the elevator doors opened, revealing Vera Petrov, now transformed from maintenance worker to polished corporate executive in a tailored suit, her previous cap replaced by an elegant hairstyle. She moved with confidence through the lobby, exchanging professional nods with several summit staff members who clearly recognized her in her Sophia Keller identity. "I'm following," Michael murmured, falling into step at a discreet distance as Petrov exited the hotel. Outside, Geneva sparkled under clear autumn skies, Lake Geneva's famous jet d'eau fountain visible in the distance. Petrov moved purposefully along the waterfront promenade, eventually entering a small cafe with a view of the lake. She selected an outdoor table, ordered coffee, and appeared to settle in to wait. Michael positioned himself at a newspaper kiosk with clear sightlines to Petrov's location. "She's meeting someone," he reported. "Waterfront cafe, approximately 300 meters east of the hotel. I've got eyes on the approach routes," Kate confirmed, having followed Michael outside. Standing by, they didn't have to wait long. Within 10 minutes, a distinguished-looking man in his 60s approached Petrov's table. Tall, silver-haired, with the confident bearing of someone accustomed to authority. "I know him." Dufresne's voice carried clear shock through the earpiece. "That's Anders Reinhardt, United Nations Undersecretary for Security Affairs. He's overseeing the entire summit security operation." The implications were staggering. Not just a rogue operation, but one with tentacles reaching into the highest levels of summit security. Reinhardt's position would give him unrestricted access to all venues, all security protocols, and the authority to dismiss or redirect any concerns raised about suspicious equipment. Kate captured photographs from her position, documenting the meeting. This confirms high-level involvement. Reinhardt could override any security alerts about the translation system. Michael observed the interaction closely. Though he couldn't hear their conversation, the body language was revealing. Petrov deferential but confident. Reinhardt tense but authoritative. A brief exchange of documents occurred, concealed from casual observation but visible from Michael's elevated position. "They're reviewing something," he reported, "possibly final operational plans." The meeting lasted less than 15 minutes. Reinhardt departed first, moving back toward the Palais des Nations with the brisk efficiency of a man with important responsibilities. Petrov remained at her table for several minutes, finishing her coffee before finally standing to leave. "I'll continue following Petrov," Michael decided. "Kate, maintain position at the hotel. Mercer, see if you can track Reinhardt's movements at the Palais without being detected." "Copy that," Mercer acknowledged. "Dufresne and I will coordinate." Michael maintained a careful distance as he followed Petrov, who walked unhurriedly back toward the hotel. Her confidence was evident, the demeanor of someone who believed their plans were proceeding perfectly, undetected and unstoppable. That confidence wavered only once. When Petrov paused at a newspaper stand, her attention caught by an international headline about unexpected last-minute attendees to the summit. Michael couldn't see which headline specifically had captured her interest, but the momentary tension in her posture was revealing. Back at the hotel, Petrov returned to the 7th floor. Kate, who had resumed her position in the cafe, reported no further movement from the North Star suites over the next hour. "Eliza," Michael asked through their secure channel, "any progress on neutralizing the delivery system?" "Partial success," she replied, her voice reflecting both accomplishment and frustration. "I've managed to access the control parameters for the translation system, but there are hardware safeguards I can't override remotely. I can delay activation but not prevent it entirely." "How much delay?" "Minutes at most. Maybe 10, depending on how quickly they identify and counter my interference. Not enough time to evacuate the summit without creating chaos that the conspirators might exploit. They needed to neutralize the threat at its source. We need to move on Petrov and her team," Michael decided. "Capture them, extract confirmation of the plot, use that to convince summit security to shut down the translation system entirely." "Risky," Mercer cautioned. "If we move too soon and miss any team members, they could accelerate the timeline. If we wait too long, we risk losing our window entirely," Michael countered. "The summit's opening session is tomorrow morning. Once world leaders are in position, the variables multiply exponentially." After brief deliberation, they settled on a plan. Using Dufresne's access, they would initiate a false fire alarm on the 7th floor only, limited enough to evacuate the floor without causing hotel-wide panic. As North Star personnel emerged, they would be quietly intercepted and secured by Michael and Mercer, posing as summit security responding to the alarm. "Timing is critical," Mercer emphasized during their final coordination. "We need to take all 4 targets simultaneously to prevent any alerts being sent." As evening fell over Geneva, they moved into position. Kate and Dufresne established a temporary operations center in a service room adjacent to the 7th floor. monitoring both hotel security cameras and their targets' movements. Michael and Mercer, now in full summit security uniforms, position themselves strategically for the intercept. All 4 targets are in their respective suites. Kate confirmed. Petrov in 712, 2 males in 714, 1 male in 715. Ready on your signal, Michael responded, adrenaline sharpening his focus as it had countless times during military operations. Initiating fire alarm in 3, 2, 1, the alarm sounded, a localized alert rather than the hotel's main system. Within moments, doors began opening along the corridor as guests responded to the evacuation order being announced in multiple languages over the floor's speakers. Petrov emerged from 712, looking irritated but not suspicious. From 714, 2 men in business attire appeared, one young and athletic, the other middle-aged with the hard eyes of a veteran operative. The occupant of 715, a lean man with close-cropped hair and watchful eyes, was the last to emerge, locking his door with particular care despite the apparent emergency. Security personnel, Michael announced authoritatively, approaching with Mercer. Please follow us to the designated evacuation point. For a crucial moment, the ruse worked. The North Star team began moving toward Michael and Mercer, still maintaining their corporate cover identities. Then, with the sudden recognition that comes from one professional identifying another, the younger man from 714 stiffened, his hand moving subtly toward his waistband. Now, Michael said sharply. What followed was a precisely choreographed takedown, executed with the coordinated efficiency of experienced operators. Michael neutralized Petrov and the younger man with swift, decisive movements, while Mercer handled the remaining 2. Within seconds, all 4 targets were restrained, their concealed weapons secured. Clear, Michael reported as Kate and Dufresne emerged from the service room. Let's move them before hotel security responds to the alarm. Using service elevators and corridors mapped in advance, they transported their captives to a secure maintenance facility Dufresne had prepared in the hotel's basement. The false alarm was reset. Hotel security informed it had been a system malfunction, and all evidence of the operation erased from surveillance systems. In the maintenance facility, a windowless room filled with mechanical equipment that masked sounds and provided privacy, the interrogation began. Petrov, as the apparent operational lead, was their primary focus. Vera Petrov, Mercer addressed her by her real name. Or do you prefer Sophia Keller? Her expression remained impassive, professional even in captivity. I don't know what you're talking about. This is an outrage. I'm a technical consultant for the summit. A technical consultant who maintains chemical delivery systems disguised as translation equipment, Michael countered. We know about Lazarus Protocol. We know about the binary agent designed to eliminate summit participants. A flicker of surprise crossed Petrov's features before she regained control. You're delusional. We tracked you from the Palais des Nations after your 2 a.m. equipment check, Kate said, displaying photographs on a tablet. We documented your meeting with Undersecretary Reinhardt. We have access to the diagnostic systems for the translation equipment. She leaned forward slightly. The only question now is whether you'll be remembered as a mass murderer or as someone who helped prevent a catastrophe. Petrov's eyes narrowed, calculating odds and options with the cold precision of a veteran operative. Even if what you're suggesting were true, you have no authority here, no legal standing. True, Dufresne acknowledged. But in approximately 12 hours, we will have confirmed evidence of an assassination plot targeting 12 world leaders. When that evidence emerges, everyone associated with the plot will be hunted to the ends of the earth. He paused meaningfully. Unless they've already demonstrated cooperation, it was standard interrogation strategy, offering a path to mitigation without promising specific outcomes. For long moments, Petrov maintained her silence, eyes moving between her captors, assessing each in turn. When her gaze settled on Michael, something shifted in her expression. I know you, she said finally. You're Reeves, the one who survived Nur Sultan. A cold smile touched her lips. You should have stayed buried in your nightmares, soldier. Some ghosts aren't meant to rise. The personal recognition was unexpected. Michael kept his expression neutral, but his mind raced with implications. How do you know about Nur Sultan? Because Lazarus Protocol isn't just about tomorrow's summit, Petrov replied, something almost like respect entering her voice. It's the culmination of years of careful positioning. Your team in Kazakhstan was getting too close to historical documentation that would have exposed the groundwork. That wasn't acceptable. The confirmation of what Mercer had suggested earlier, that Michael's team had been deliberately targeted, hit with physical force. But there was no time for personal reckonings. The mission came first. The summit attack, Michael pressed. Confirm the details. Petrov studied him for a long moment, then made her decision. Lazarus Protocol has 3 components. The summit is only one. Even if you stop it, the others will proceed. What are the other components? Simultaneous operations targeting financial systems and global communications infrastructure, she explained with the detached professionalism of a briefing officer. The summit elimination creates the crisis. Financial manipulation prevents effective response. Communications disruption ensures maximum chaos during the critical window. Window for what? Mercer demanded. Restructuring. Petrov said simply. The current world order is unsustainable. Corrupt, inefficient, heading toward collapse. Lazarus creates controlled demolition instead of unpredictable implosion. Who controls this new structure? Kate asked. Who benefits? Those who understand that power must be consolidated to address existential threats humanity refuses to confront otherwise. Petrov's conviction was evident. Climate collapse, resource scarcity, population pressures. The current system of competing nation-states cannot solve these problems. Unified authority is required. Authoritarianism disguised as salvation? Michael observed. How original. Petrov's smile was cold. Judge if you wish. History will determine who was right. Through careful questioning, they extracted the operational details they needed, confirmation of the chemical agent, the activation protocols, the fail-safes built into the system. With each revelation, Dufresne documented meticulously, building the evidence package they would need to convince Summit security of the threat. Reinhardt isn't the only insider. Petrov revealed eventually. We have people throughout the Summit organization. Even if you remove the translation system, alternate methods are in place. Names, Mercer demanded. We need every conspirator. For the next hour, they built a comprehensive picture of the Lazarus operation, its personnel, its methods, its objectives. Petrov, having decided to cooperate, provided information with the clinical precision of a professional who recognized when a particular operation was compromised. As dawn approached, Michael stepped away briefly to contact Eliza, who had remained at the safe house coordinating their communications and continuing work on the technical countermeasures. We have confirmation, he told her. Everything you suspected about the delivery system was correct. But there's more. The summit is just one component of a coordinated global operation. I've been seeing indications in financial data. Eliza replied, her voice tense with focused energy. Massive positioning in key markets, ready to capitalize on crisis. And unusual activity in satellite communication systems. Possible preparation for disruption. We need to move on multiple fronts now, Michael decided. Neutralize the summit threat, but also alert financial regulatory authorities and communication security agencies. I'm already compiling the data packages, Eliza confirmed. But Michael, she hesitated. The evidence Petrov provided about your team in Kazakhstan. Are you okay? The simple question caught him off guard. In the intensity of the operation, he'd pushed aside the personal revelation that his team's deaths had been deliberately engineered by Lazarus operatives. Now, with Eliza's gentle prompting, the reality of it washed over him. I will be, he answered honestly. Once this is finished. We're close, she assured him. So close to ending this. As the sun rose over Geneva, casting golden light across Lake Geneva and illuminating the Alps in the distance, their plan took final shape. Dufresne would present their evidence to the summit's security committee, strategically excluding Reinhardt, calling for immediate shutdown of the translation system and arrest of the identified conspirators. Kate and Mercer would coordinate with international authorities to address the financial and communications aspects of Lazarus Protocol. Michael would return to the Palais des Nations with technical specialists to physically neutralize the chemical delivery system in case remote shutdown failed. Before departing the hotel, Michael had one final exchange with Petrov as she was being secured for transfer to authorities. Why tell us everything? He asked, genuinely curious about her cooperation. You could have maintained denial, tried to protect the operation. Petrov regarded him with that same cold professionalism she had displayed throughout. Because operatives recognize when a mission is compromised. Adaptation is the mark of intelligence. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. Besides, Lazarus is bigger than any single operation. Even with this setback, the underlying objective remains in motion. We'll find it and stop it, Michael promised. Whatever remains of your network, whatever other operations you have planned, perhaps, she acknowledged. Or perhaps you've simply delayed the inevitable. Some problems can't be solved by the existing system, Reeves. Remember that when the crises Lazarus predicted began to unfold naturally? As Petrov was led away, Michael considered her warning. Was there truth in the Lazarus worldview? That existing global structures were inadequate to address humanity's greatest challenges? Perhaps, but their methods, assassination, manipulation, authoritarian control, represented everything he had fought against throughout his military career. Some problems required systemic change, but that change had to come through democratic processes, through cooperation and consensus, not through violence and forced restructuring. The end never justified means that violated fundamental human dignity and freedom. With renewed determination, Michael joined the team heading to the Palais des Nations. 6 hours remained until the summit's opening session. 6 hours to neutralize a threat 3 years in the making. 6 hours to complete a journey that had begun on a rainy night in Seattle when an ex-soldier saved a stranger from a robbery, unknowingly stepping into the heart of a global conspiracy. Whatever came after, Michael knew with bone-deep certainty that he was exactly where he needed to be, standing between innocent people and those who would harm them in the name of their vision for a better world. The afternoon sun illuminated the jet d'eau fountain in Geneva's harbor, water shooting 140 meters into the clear blue sky as Michael stood on the promenade, watching delegations arrive for the summit's successful opening session. Behind him, Lake Geneva stretched toward distant mountains, peaceful and eternal, indifferent to the crisis that had been averted just hours earlier. "It's strange," came Eliza's voice as she joined him at the railing. "Everyone walking into that building has no idea how close they came to disaster." "That's how it usually works," Michael replied, offering her a cup of coffee from the nearby kiosk. "The best operations are the ones nobody ever knows about." In the end, their mission had succeeded through a combination of technological intervention and old-fashioned human intelligence work. Dufresne had convinced Summit Security to replace the entire translation system, using Petrov's captured testimony and Eliza's technical evidence. Reinhardt and 17 other conspirators had been quietly detained, their arrests kept from the media to prevent panic or disruption of the summit. Cade and Mercer had coordinated with financial authorities to freeze the assets identified in the Lazarus network, preventing the market manipulation that would have accompanied the summit attack. Communications agencies had located and neutralized the systems intended to disrupt global information flow during the critical window. "Do you think we got all of them?" Eliza asked, sipping her coffee as they watched the diplomatic procession. "No," Michael answered honestly. Petrov was right about one thing. Lazarus is bigger than this single operation. There will be others, other cells, other plans, but we have the data now. The patterns, we can watch for them, identify them before they activate. Michael nodded, finding comfort in her practical optimism. "And we have names, organizations, financial networks. It's a starting point." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the pageantry of world diplomacy unfold against the backdrop of a threat only they and a handful of others knew had existed. After days of intense focus and danger, the peaceful moment felt almost surreal. "I've been offered a position," Eliza said eventually, "with a joint task force specifically focused on identifying and neutralizing remnants of Lazarus Protocol. Apparently my data analysis skills impress some people in high places." "You're considering it?" "I am." She turned to face him. "It would mean leaving my old life behind, becoming something different than I ever imagined for myself. Someone who makes a difference," Michael suggested, echoing words he had spoken days earlier. Her smile was warm. "Exactly." She hesitated. "They asked about you too. Said your field experience would be invaluable to the operation." The offer wasn't entirely unexpected. In the aftermath of their success, several agencies had approached Michael, recognizing that the skills he had demonstrated went far beyond those of a retired soldier. Still, he had hesitated to commit, uncertain whether returning to a life of operations and intelligence work was the right path forward. "What did you tell them?" he asked. "That you'd been trying to leave that life behind. That after what happened to your team, you might not want to step back into the shadows." Her eyes held his. "But I also told them that I'd never seen anyone more capable or more certain of their purpose than when you were working to stop Lazarus." Michael looked out over the lake, considering her words. For 3 years, he had been adrift, existing rather than living, haunted by failures he couldn't reconcile. Then a chance encounter on a rainy night had thrust him back into a world of purpose and consequence, of difference-making on the largest scale. More importantly, it had connected him with Eliza, A woman whose brilliance, courage, and fundamental decency had reminded him of what he had always fought for. Not abstract concepts like national security or global stability, but people. Individuals with dreams and potential, with the right to live free from manipulation by those who believed their vision justified any means. The nightmares are different now, he said after a long moment. I still see the explosion, still see my team, but now I understand why it happened. There's purpose to their sacrifice that I couldn't see before, and purpose to your survival, Eliza added gently. Yes, Michael turned to face her fully. I've spent 3 years trying to outrun who I am, what I'm capable of. Maybe it's time to stop running. Her smile widened, hope evident in her expression. Does that mean you're considering their offer? I'm considering a lot of things, he replied, returning her smile, including what happens after operations and intelligence work. The personal future I never let myself imagine before. Something shifted in her eyes. Understanding of what he was really saying. That sounds like a conversation worth having. Over dinner, perhaps. Once we've finished debriefing with the task force, I'd like that. Behind them, the summit proceeded without incident. World leaders discussing global challenges, unaware of how close they had come to tragedy. Around them, Geneva continued its peaceful existence, citizens and tourists enjoying the beautiful autumn day. As Michael and Eliza walked along the promenade, discussing details of the task force offer and making tentative plans for dinner, Michael felt something he hadn't experienced in 3 years. Hope. Not just for the mission or for justice, but for himself, for a future that might include purpose and connection, making a difference, and building a life worth living. The ex-soldier who had saved a stranger from a robbery, unknowingly preventing a global conspiracy, had found his way back to himself. And in the process, perhaps, found something even more valuable, a second chance at a life fully lived, with someone who understood both his darkness and his light. As they reached the end of the promenade, Michael paused, looking back at the Palais des Nations one last time. Ready for whatever comes next? He asked. Eliza's hand found his, warm and certain. Together? Absolutely. Together, then, into whatever future awaited.